Funny how people beg for signs, cry for help, scream into the void. Where are you? Show me something. And then when something finally shows up, they scroll right past it. Blink, laugh, swipe, like salvation's just another ad. See, they want miracles, but only if they look shiny, clean, packaged. They don't want truth unless it's trending. Don't want answers unless they're comfortable. But what if the moment you've been waiting for doesn't come wrapped in gold? What if it shows up in the middle of your mess, dripping in silence, disguised as a whisper? They think if it's from above, it's gotta sparkle. Flashy lights, booming voices, clouds parting like some kind of divine commercial break. They want the heavens to roll out the red carpet, not realizing the greatest invitations don't come dressed for attention. It's hilarious, really. People pray for signs, cry in the dark, plead for help. Send me something, they beg. And when it comes, not as a miracle, but as a nudge, a feeling, a glance, a word that cuts too close, they shrug it off like static, because it didn't look grand enough, didn't match their idea of what divine intervention should look like. Because the universe didn't come in costume, they called it nothing. They scrolled right by their own answer and blamed the silence. No spotlights, no thunderclaps, just a moment. Quiet, slippery, almost invisible if you're not paying attention. But of course, they're never paying attention. Too busy waiting for the show to start while the message already walked past them, unnoticed, unbothered. You see, the real stuff, the sacred, raw, unfiltered truth, it shows up ordinary, familiar, sometimes annoying, wrapped in a conversation you didn't want to have, a thought you tried to bury, a stranger's voice that hit too deep. That's the trick. It doesn't look impressive. It looks like you. Most people miss it because they're too busy chasing noise. They want their faith to feel like fireworks, not like stillness. But stillness, that's where the shift happens. That's where the invitation lives. Not in the chaos, not in the clapping. In the pause. That second when you felt something and immediately tried to distract yourself. That was it. That was the reach. And you skipped it. Because you thought something sacred would never feel that personal. It looks like your mess, your past, your guilt. And no one wants their breakthrough to look like that. They want it dressed up. They want it palatable, easy to post. But when the reach comes, it doesn't care what makes you comfortable. It cares what shakes you awake. The truth is, we've trained ourselves to ignore what matters. We've gotten so good at filtering out the uncomfortable that we've started filtering out the truth. You've been taught to wait for permission to change, to wait for big signs. Meanwhile, God's been using your breakdown, your insomnia, your gut feeling as a megaphone. But no, it didn't glow, so you called it coincidence. You put your headphones in, you turned the volume up, and just like that, you missed it. Again. But what if the whole point is that it doesn't look impressive? What if the reason it keeps coming softly is because it's not trying to perform? It's trying to reach you. Not the mask. Not the character. You. The one behind the fake smiles and survival scripts. But you're too distracted by your idea of divine to notice the divine trying to reach through your distractions. People say, if it's meant for me, I won't miss it. That's cute, but also wrong. You can miss what's meant for you if you're not present enough to see it. You can miss the shift if you're staring at your screen. You can miss the invitation if you're too obsessed with how it's delivered. Because it doesn't come dressed in gold. It comes in interruptions, in gut punches, in inconvenient truths. And if you need it to look impressive, you'll keep missing what was actually meant to save you. It never screams. It never kicks the door down. It doesn't need to. That's the thing about power, the real kind. It doesn't have to shout to be heard. It just waits, patient, still, right there between your racing thoughts and your constant distractions. But you wouldn't know that, would you? Because silence makes you uncomfortable, makes you itch, makes you reach for anything, noise, drama, nonsense, just to fill the space that was supposed to wake you up. You think silence means nothing's happening, that stillness is absence, but that's where it all begins. That's where the shift starts, not in the chaos, not in the noise, in the quiet. But the world trained you to ignore that. It rewards noise. It praises busy. It tells you that if you're not moving, you're losing. And you bought it. You thought the silence meant you were stuck. You never considered it was a setup. Because in that silence, something reaches. Not with hands, not with words, with awareness, with presence. That strange, almost suffocating feeling that maybe, just maybe, you're not as alone as you pretend to be. That someone or something is watching, not judging, not scolding. But you miss it. Over and over, because it's not loud, it's not obvious, it's just there, waiting for you to shut up long enough to feel it. You want signs? You want a voice from the sky? How about the fact that you haven't been able to sleep? That every time you try to numb out, something pulls you back in? That no matter how much noise you throw on top of it, it keeps crawling back in through the cracks? That's not random. That's not anxiety, that's the reach. And you keep brushing it off because it didn't come with a title and theme music. People want change, but they don't want interruption. They want to evolve, but keep their schedule. They want divine intervention, but only if it's convenient. But the reach doesn't care about your calendar. It's not here to negotiate. It's not here to explain itself. It doesn't arrive with fireworks. It shows up like a whisper at 3 a.m. It shows up in that moment you almost cried but swallowed it back down. In that random memory that punches you out of nowhere. That's not nostalgia. That's not weakness. That's the knock. The gentle one. The one that gets louder if you keep ignoring it. But you've built a life on ignoring it. You wear your distractions like armor. Your scrolling, your sarcasm, your schedule full of things that don't matter. That's not life, that's avoidance. And deep down, you know it. You feel it. You just don't want to sit in the quiet long enough to admit it. Because silence strips the mask. It forces the questions. It shows you everything you tried to bury. And right there, in that raw, uncomfortable space, is where the reach waits. Not to punish you, to pull you out. But you keep running. You keep skipping the stillness like it's a threat, like it'll destroy you. But the only thing silence destroys is your illusion. And maybe that's what you're really afraid of. Not the voice in the silence, but what it reveals about the noise you cling to. Because if you stop long enough, if you listen closely, you'll hear something that doesn't sound like the world, doesn't sound like you. And that's the part they don't talk about. The moment the volume drops and you finally hear what's been trying to reach you this whole time. You asked for help, didn't you? Whispered it in the dark. Cried it into your pillow. Screamed it at the ceiling when no one was around to hear. Said, if something's out there, give me a sign. And then what? It came. Not how you wanted it, but it came. Maybe it looked like a closed door. Maybe it felt like a breakdown. Maybe it was that one sentence that hit too hard from someone who barely knows you. But it came. And what did you do? You brushed it off, called it coincidence, laughed, scrolled, skipped it like it was nothing. That's the joke. You prayed for intervention and then ignored the hand that showed up. because you thought it would come glowing, holy, wrapped in clarity and comfort, maybe with angel wings or at least a little background music. But nah, it came in the middle of your chaos, dragging your attention back to the very thing you were running from. It showed up in the mess. It looked like pain. It sounded like silence. And because it didn't feel good, you said it couldn't be good. Because it didn't stroke your ego, you said it couldn't be divine. People say they want answers, but they really want reassurance. They want a yes. They want a path that doesn't require pain. They don't want truth, they want comfort dressed as truth. But the truth doesn't care about your preferences. It's not here to make you feel safe. It's here to make you real. So when the hand reaches, it's not there to pet you. It's there to pull you out of your delusion, out of your distraction, out of the prison you decorated and started calling a personality. But you skipped it. Again. You said, this can't be it. You asked for healing, but rejected the medicine. Because the real stuff burns. It stings. It tastes like everything you didn't want to confront. It's not filtered. It's not sanitized. It's raw and ugly, and it knows your name. So of course you look the other way. That's what people do when they get exactly what they asked for, but not in the packaging they expected. See, the reach doesn't stop. It's patient. It'll come back again, through another moment, another breakdown, another unexpected silence in the middle of your noise. But each time you skip it, you lose a little more of the connection. Not because it's gone, but because you stopped recognizing it. You trained your mind to ignore the sacred, to doubt the shift, to scroll past the very thing you begged for because it didn't flatter you enough. The hand doesn't force. That's the part you don't get. It reaches, it invites, and then it waits, and watches you pretend you're not drowning while you post quotes about healing. Watches you laugh over your wounds like that's strength. Watches you fake resilience while something inside you crumbles, and even then it stays close. Because that's mercy. That's love. The kind that doesn't need applause. The kind that shows up even when you've stopped showing up for yourself. But there's a cost to skipping the hand too many times. Eventually, the noise becomes normal. The silence stops feeling like an invitation and starts feeling like punishment. And you forget. You forget what it feels like to be called higher. You forget what hope felt like before you numbed it out. You forget that the first time it reached, it felt like everything inside you paused for just a second and said, "Look." And instead you looked away, and you called it strength. You called it independence. But really, you were just scared to be seen by something that couldn't be fooled by your performance. You ever notice how some of the biggest moves in your life didn't come with warning signs or applause? No announcement, no parade, just a strange feeling in your chest, a tightness, a sudden shift in the air like something was off, or maybe on. Maybe, just maybe, something was unfolding that your mouth couldn't explain, but your bones could feel. That's how it works when the real stuff shows up. Doesn't scream, doesn't beg for attention. It moves in shadows, whispers. It waits until you're quiet enough to hear it, or broken enough to finally listen. The loud ones, they want spectacle. They think change has to be dramatic, public, worthy of a standing ovation. But the truth slips through the cracks. It's the look you gave yourself in the mirror at 2:47 a.m. It's the tear that fell for no reason while you were brushing your teeth. It's the breath you didn't know you were holding when someone said exactly what you weren't ready to hear. And that's where it happens. Right there. That's the shift. That's the moment you were supposed to catch. But you missed it. But you missed it because you were looking for a sign that looked like a movie scene. You wanted fireworks. You wanted the clouds to part. Instead, it came in stillness. It came wrapped in discomfort. It came looking like a quiet urge to stop pretending. And because it didn't announce itself like a headline, you called it nothing. But that nothing was everything. See, some moves are made in silence to protect their purpose. They're not quiet because they're weak. They're quiet because they're targeted, calculated, a divine ambush. And if you broadcast them too soon, you kill them before they bloom. That's why some of the most powerful things in your life felt like secrets, because they had to be, because the world around you couldn't handle them yet. And maybe, just maybe, neither could you. You want to tell people what's shifting in you. You want to explain it, prove it, justify it. But that's not how this works. Some things lose their strength the moment you speak them out loud. Some transformations are too raw to survive exposure. They need shadow. They need silence. They need time to grow in the dark before they're ready for the light. But you keep trying to make them visible before they're strong enough to stand. And that's where most people lose it. They reveal too soon. They post too early. They shout what should have been whispered. And then they wonder why the shift falls apart, why the spark fizzles, why the clarity fades. It's because you brought it out of the shadows before it was ready. You interrupted the becoming. You invited voices that weren't meant to witness it, because you didn't trust the quiet. The biggest moves aren't made on stages. They're made in silence, in your car, in your shower, in the back corners of your mind where no one claps and no one sees. That's where decisions happen. That's where alignment takes root. Not when you're performing, not when you're explaining, when you're honest with yourself, with the thing reaching for you, with the change that doesn't need validation, only obedience. But that makes people uncomfortable. They want to feel seen. They want to be understood. But this moment, it's not for understanding. It's not for explaining. It's for moving, quietly, carefully, without asking for permission, without alerting the noise. Because once you step into that kind of shift, you start to see the value in silence, the protection in privacy, the strength in not announcing your every step. Because the more sacred the move, the more it demands to be hidden while it's being made. Funny thing about people, they think time is this polite little waiter, always ready to refill your glass when you're done sipping your excuses. They think the shift, the change, the moment will wait around like a good little dog until they're finally ready. But no, that's not how this works. Some doors don't stay open. Some windows slam shut before you even realize you were standing in front of one. But people, they scroll. They sleep. They say, maybe next week, like the universe is on a leash. And then when it's gone, when it moves without them, they call it unfair. No, darling. It was right there. You just didn't move when it mattered. You keep saying you're not ready, but the shift didn't ask if you were. It showed up, uninvited, unannounced. And it doesn't care if your hair's done or your story makes sense or your followers approve. It came for you, not your presentation. But you hesitate, you second guess, you stall. Because deep down, you know, if you say yes to this moment, it's going to burn away everything fake, everything borrowed, everything you built to impress people who don't even see you. And you're terrified of what's left when that's gone. So you wait. You act like the moment will come back around. Like timing is a revolving door. But this isn't a practice run. There's no rehearsal. No one's going to hand you a laminated schedule with your transformation neatly blocked off between errands and coffee dates. Life doesn't work that way. Neither does purpose. And definitely not calling. When it knocks now. When it stirs your gut, your chest, your sleep, it's not doing that because it's being polite. It's doing that because it's time. But you're still pretending you didn't hear it. You keep hoping the shift will wait until you're more confident, more stable, more accepted. But that's not a shift. That's a performance. The real thing doesn't show up when you feel ready. It shows up when you've been cracked wide open. When your comfort can't contain you anymore. When the mask starts to suffocate. That's when it comes. And you've already felt it. That pull, that friction, that tiny voice that said, "This isn't it." And you ignored it. Not because you didn't believe it, but because you did. See, people think skipping the shift is harmless, like silence means safety. But what they don't get is that stillness turns into rot if you sit in it too long. When you say no to what's next, you're not staying still. You're decaying. The weight grows. The noise gets louder. The fire you didn't feed starts to eat you instead. And eventually you forget there was ever a door. You normalize the ache. You call it personality. You decorate the cage and pretend it's a throne. And all the while, that shift is miles ahead, waiting for the version of you that was brave enough to say yes. But here's the kicker. The shift didn't leave because it stopped caring. It left because it can't force what must be chosen. And that's what most people miss. You have to choose. Not just with words, but with action, with sacrifice, with letting go of whatever fantasy you're still clinging to. And no one can do that part for you, not your friends. You want the shift to feel safe. It won't. You want it to make sense. It won't. You want it to come wrapped in certainty, in clarity, in something that makes people nod along. It won't. Because the shift isn't here to be understood. It's here to undo you, strip you, break your rhythm, make you uncomfortable enough to finally remember who you were before the world told you who to be. Not your coach, not your God. Just you standing in front of the fire deciding whether you're ready to stop faking survival and start living the kind of truth that ruins everything fake in its path.